I can't compete with these other companies unless you give me the same deal. We can't do it anymore. And the sooner we say no, the sooner we establish the fact that we'll help you in any way we can, but we can no longer afford to subsidize businesses the way that we've been doing. The money's just not there. And the sooner we get the word out, the sooner people will come here and know that they're going to have to come on their own nickel.
I guess the second half of that question is, what part of the budget, in essence, are you going to have to shrink to make things balance?
Oh, well, in terms of the budget, I think we won't know until we get in there and do an independent audit, which we are, because I'll tell you, the auditor is going to go into that office before I do. I'm not accepting responsibility for what I find there. They asked John Kennedy after 6 months in office, they said, Mr. Kennedy, what's your biggest surprise after becoming president? And he said that things were worse than I said they were. That was the big surprise. And so for me, I'm going to bring in the squeakiest, cleanest set of accountants that I can find, and they're going to go in there and discover where our money is and isn't, and we're going to make that public to the people of Akron. But the biggest cuts are going to be made in the mayor's office. We started with 8 at the time this mayor took office some quarter of a century ago, and now we have 15. That's more than New York City. I mean, do we really need 15 cabinet members? I think not. And so we're going to cut, and we're going to start with the mayor's office. But I can tell you this, too. There's some areas that need help. And the budget needs to go to some people like the building inspectors. We have housing inspectors, 1 for every 2 wards. It's ridiculous.
Well, let me respond directly to your question and try to answer it. First of all, we have cut 800 positions from 30 years ago in a budget that, without question, is tight, considering that every local government, no matter where you're located, whether it's a small township or a large city like New York City, has lost money from 30 years ago when the federal government recognized their partnership and provided additional resources. In our case, it's over $30 million of federal and state cuts. And yet we've still been able to keep our police and fire at budgeted strength. There are more people working in the Akron Police Department now than there was 30 years ago. We're working smarter because we have civilians in the radio room doing dispatch, taking calls, but there are more people working in the Akron Police Department, which makes it possible to have more trained officers on the street rather than sitting in taking calls. So we're working smarter, but we have kept the police and fire budget. But without question, there's going to be a continuing challenge to be able to meet the needs in public safety, given some of the gang and youth violence that has occurred all across the country. And I think we also need to be thinking about the problems that come about with mandates from the federal government as they cut back the budget to local governments. They haven't cut back the number of mandates. They've continued to pass down unfunded mandates. So environmental mitigation, whether it's our CSO problem that we've started to address or various other problems with energy saving, we're going to try to address those issues by holding the line in the service industry, in the service departments, and trying to build the capacity for the police using modern methods. And I think that's always a challenge. It's also controversial. I have to tell you, there's no easy way to do this in the mayor's office. Some things need to change. Some things that we're still doing in this country in various departments that we did 50 years ago with the explanation that's always the way we've done them. I've tried to bring about those changes, and many of them are controversial because many people don't like to change. But let me just, I have to say something about this. There's so many, you know, I'm for the Spicer Village, but in another location, he's against eminent domain. At another location, he's for Goodyear, saving Goodyear. In another location, he's against eminent domain to help the Goodyear project. These counter statements that he's making, including right here today, is beyond belief. But my opponent should have read, he didn't spend too much time working as a councilman, but he should have read the ratings that come out from people from New York City. And I'm sure he will tell the average person out there that people who are at Fitch and Standard & Poor's and Moody's probably don't know as much as he does. That's what he'll tell people out on the campaign trail. But here are finance reports that are their reports on our ratings: moderate debt levels are moderate, stable outlook, reflects Akron's adequate revenue levels, healthy financial operations supported by satisfactory reserve levels. Here are 2 budget awards, copies of those awards that we've received every year since I've been mayor, talking about our transparency and how the information about budgets is out there if anyone wishes to spend the time to look. The wild accusations are really what my opponent campaign has been all about. But the truth is that rating agencies who do this for a living and their reputations depend on it have rated us moderate debt and good financial outlook. Is the budget tight? Absolutely, it's tight. I don't know any place in the country where that's not the case. But we're going to do everything we can to make sure we provide the services to the citizens of Akron. And I want to say this. The reason that I asked for issue 17 was because it is honest leadership. It was saying that we as a community may want to look at doing more. We may want to hire more police officers. We may want to do more in economic development because, ladies and gentlemen, everyone in this room should know it, even if my opponent doesn't. This is a worldwide, global competition, and people are out to take our jobs. They're out to make their communities better and more quality of life, and we have to compete in that global marketplace. It is not good enough to have somebody appeal to people on their memories of what used to be here. I'd love to do that. My 80-year-old mother is here. You think I wouldn't like to tell her and her friends when I go to the senior citizen groups that we could have the rubber companies back here billowing out smoke and making tires? That would be wonderful, but I'm not going to lie to them. You know what I tell them? Their kids and their grandkids have to have a college education or at least a couple of years of technical school, or they're not going to have a job. In my dad's age, saying to someone, finish your high school education, you can get a good job, was good enough. It's not good enough now. That's the leadership I want to provide, to make sure and encourage that our kids are educated so they can just take those jobs in the future and not wallow around talking about things in the past and complaining about something and making up statistics that really aren't accurate. So again, honest leadership versus the alternative.
Let me ask a question for both of you, even though it's a national problem, and that is subprime mortgages. Do you have evidence, do either of you have evidence of how badly that is affecting the city of Akron?
Well, I think the statistics show that Ohio is the leading state in the country, unfortunately, and Summit County is very high, if not the highest. And it is a problem that we've been working on for a number of years, especially with my involvement in the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And my opponent out on the campaign trail will tell people it's terrible to travel. He's going to sit in his office and everything's going to come to him. You know, all these people are going to come to him and tell him everything and let him know all their plans, and everything is going to come. The businesses are going to come to him. It doesn't work that way. So my involvement with the Conference of Mayors, we just recently have sent a letter lobbying Congress to pass legislation to allow people to do things that in the past we've been prohibited. Even our own state government has passed a bill prohibiting local government from passing ordinances to be able to affect in some way directly through legislation this terrible problem of these subprime lenders and this predatory lending issue. But we've been prohibited. What we have done is partner with the county. And I know Renee Green was involved and talked about this last week at the 4th Ward meeting, that these folks out there, sometimes the problem is they just don't know enough and they aren't educated enough about the fine detail, and they go ahead and sign something from really some unscrupulous lender, and they end up later on finding out that there's this big balloon payment. It's an arm. It's the adjusted rate mortgages that they don't think about and